So what if I showed you indisputable documented proof that the 16th president of the United States of America, Abraham Lincoln, was a black man? In the shocking video, I will also provide you with concealed documentation that proves that the 7th Vice President of the United States of America, John C. Calhoun, the man whose thoughts caused the South to secede from America, ultimately leading up to the American Civil War. Calhoun fathered the man who would later be forced into a war to free the enslaved in America. The unforgivable sin of the Confederacy committed by Calhoun is the reason why the true history of Calhoun and Lincoln, two of the most influential early American politicians, have been canceled from American history. This unbelievable American history altering account exposes a deep, dark truth about how a former racist vice president, who was the most powerful man in America prior to the American Civil War, secretly birthed children by enslaved black Cherokee Indian girls in the state of South Carolina. This unforgettable story has been hidden for about 220 years. Up until now, the unknown family history of Abraham Lincoln has remained a mystery of American history for everyone outside of the few who still hold the secret inside of the Palmetto State. This is why most historians are unaware that the life of Nancy Hanks, the mother of Abraham Lincoln, began in the state of South Carolina. The truth is, the story that details the facts about the identity of President Abraham Lincoln was several times reported to the press after the Lincoln assassination. Somehow, the stories that verified Lincoln's true beginnings were ignored and later vanished from American history. This compelling revelation explains how a racist vice president, the father of the Confederacy, a lawyer who was the champion defender of slavery and white supremacy, also fathered a self-educated lawyer by a black Cherokee Indian girl, and his son would later become the President of the United States of America and the man who was forced into a civil war, ultimately undoing the wrongs of his father by emancipating black people. This unknown true story began in a now unincorporated town of Creightonville, located in present-day Anderson County, South Carolina. In Creightonville, there was an old tavern that was at one time owned by a woman named Ann, who was the aunt of Nancy Hanks. Near the tavern was one of the only major dirt roads constructed that traveled through the heart of Cherokee country. A young Calhoun traveled from his home in Abbeville, South Carolina, to Pendleton, South Carolina, where the county seat was located. Calhoun also had family in the area who owned slave plantations. On his way through to Pendleton, Calhoun took notice of a young black Cherokee Indian girl named Nancy Hanks, who was a domestic servant at the Bed, Bath, and Bar. He began having an affair with the young girl, sometimes staying days at a time at the tavern. Nancy Hanks soon becomes pregnant with Abraham Lincoln. Further confirmation of John C. Calhoun fathering Abraham Lincoln came when a Superior Court judge from North Carolina named Felix E. Alley wrote in his book titled Random Thoughts and the Musings of a Mountaineer. Judge Felix Alley declared, when Nancy was discovered pregnant, Calhoun quickly admitted his guilt and gave her $500 to leave the state. For a second $500, Calhoun arranged to have a trader's hired hand to take her home with him. The hired hand was husky, hard-drinking Tom Lincoln. Whenever the trader's wife objected to having an unmarried, expectant mother under her roof, the trader gave Tom $15, a mare, and a mule to take Nancy away and marry her. Validation of Judge Alley's truth regarding the story of Calhoun fathering Lincoln was also confirmed by a member of the Calhoun family, a woman by the name of Miss Fanny Calhoun Marshall, who also attested to the same story. But she added that John C. Calhoun paid $100 a year to Abraham Lincoln, which lasted until Lincoln moved to Illinois when Lincoln turned 21 years old. Allegedly, this transcript is a portion of the copy of the certified documentation of the payment agreement in which Calhoun signed and agreed to take care of his illegitimate son, Abraham Lincoln. This paperwork is reportedly on file in the Abbeville Courthouse in South Carolina, and also in the library of Clemson University, where Judge Alley states that Clemson University is hiding the truth about Calhoun fathering Lincoln. Now that you have seen visual proof that shows you without a shadow of a doubt that former United States Vice President John C. Calhoun fathered President Abraham Lincoln, it's time to prove once and for all that Abraham Lincoln was born to a black biracial Cherokee Indian woman from upstate South Carolina.
That Abraham Lincoln was a Melungeon. He was part black, part white, and part Cherokee Indian. Now you think of a picture of Abraham Lincoln. You see the length of his arms. You see the length of his legs. You see his face. You see the color and texture of his hair. Then you tell me that he is British or Scottish or Irish. Doesn't work. He was born in Kentucky, in an area in Kentucky where there were a lot of people who were a mixture of those three color groups or those three nationalities, whatever you want to call it.
But wait, this is the reason that they never wanted black Americans to be able to trace our roots. Because of John C. Calhoun fathering Abraham Lincoln, that makes Abraham Lincoln the brother of my great-grandmother Nancy Washington Legree, whose mother also gave birth to several of the children of the Vice President of the United States of America, John C. Calhoun. The strikingly identical facial features of my 105-year-old, seventh-generation great-grandmother Nancy Washington Legree and Abraham Lincoln cannot be denied. A side-by-side view of their original photos show a deep resemblance and a near reflection of each other, despite the two of them being born nearly 30 years apart. Those in power in America have known all along that Abraham Lincoln was a black man, and this is why they also named him Abraham Africanus. Not only that, over the span of his political career, Abraham Lincoln was called several derogatory names such as ape, monkey, barbarian. His political opponents even made racist ads depicting Lincoln as a monkey holding the Emancipation Proclamation. But it gets so much deeper than that, as the truth regarding the ethnic identity of the 16th President of the United States of America, Abraham Lincoln, was found inside of a book at a public library in Greenville, South Carolina, the native state of Abraham Lincoln's mother, Nancy. This very informative book detailed the earliest true history and events that shaped the identity of the city of Greenville, South Carolina, inside of a book titled Greenville, The History of the City and County in the South Carolina Piedmont. It shockingly reveals that after Lincoln had been elected president and the news reached Columbia that the state legislature called for the election of a secession convention. And why did the state of South Carolina proceed with the secession? The answer is because South Carolina state representatives knew the truth about who Lincoln's father and his mother were. South Carolina broke away from the United States because America had elected a black Republican president in Abraham Lincoln, and here is the proof. A little over 30 days after Lincoln, a black president, was inaugurated on March 4th, 1861, when the news had reached South Carolina on April 12th, 1861, the attack on the American Hill, Fort Sumter, and Charleston Harbor erupted, as the South Carolina militia fired the first shots against the United States. Now you see proof that South Carolina started the most costly war in American history, all because of the color of the skin of President Abraham Lincoln. Tragically, 4 years later, after Lincoln had won re-election, after his inauguration, and a little over a month into his second term, on April 15th, 1865, he was assassinated because racists were upset that he was a black man who had freed millions of black Americans from slavery. I've always wondered why, out of all of the pictures of the formerly enslaved that I've ever seen in my life, why are the pictures of my two grandmothers that are on the walls at Clemson University two of the clearest, high-quality pictures of slaves that most have ever seen in their lives? Why do their pictures seem more fitting for the Smithsonian than they do for the local museum? Then I put it all together. Someone at Clemson University knew that my grandmother Nancy and her children were of the bloodline of Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator. As a result of President Lincoln being the brother of my grandmother Nancy, and by Lincoln abolishing slavery, my family of ancestors were severely punished and illegally held accountable. Atrociously, my family was enslaved at Fort Hill Plantation on the campus of Clemson University in South Carolina for over 50 years past emancipation. and Clemson University never made amends. They've only tried to bury my story just as they did with the story of Abraham Lincoln's mother, Nancy Hanks. When it's all said and done, in due time, you will find that my grandmother, Martha Elizabeth Lee, the mother of Nancy Washington Legree, was the granddaughter of Nancy Hanks, which means that John C. Calhoun, who had already married his first cousin, raped his great-granddaughter only a few decades after Lincoln was conceived only miles away in Creightonville.